It was 7 in the morning when Romulus stepped out onto Ocean Drive. A light fog floated above the ground. The humid air full of pollutants made his tunic stick to his synth skin. Mosquitoes swarmed around him. There were so many that they could clog his air intake portals and lay their eggs in his water reservoir. He was right next to a crane lowering a steel beam toward a crew of workers. The work went on day and night. As he walked, there was sporadic firing of automatic weapons, although no more explosions. Romulus hardly noticed. He thought about his feelings. He had never disobeyed his programming, even though he hadn't been built as a pleasure unit or to feel empathy. Somehow, those feelings had developed. They weren't the only feelings that had developed. He had also developed a sense of humor. He walked along Ocean Drive toward Morgan Avenue. Many others, both reals and faxes, walked with him. They were going to or getting off work from the hospital. As he walked, he thought of his joke about hospital infrastructure. He felt a crackling electricity of joy and laughed out loud. It was no quick laugh. It was a rollicking hoot that built on itself until he was having trouble walking. Everyone stared at him because he was laughing so uproariously, and he repressed his howls. As a young fax, he had never laughed. Only older faxes started to see humor, and there were few faxes as old as he was. Vehicles sped past on Ocean Drive. There were buses, self-driving vehicles, and cowboy 4x4s with machine guns mounted in the bed. They splashed rainwater and spewed exhaust. Individual reels had once been able to afford personal transportation, but that was no longer possible. They had to rely on buses or fractional ownership of self-driving vehicles. A limousine with cattle horns on the hood and the Corpus Christi logo on the doors rolled past and slowed as it neared the hospital entrance. That was Billy Bob's personal limo. Romulus had seen it on the news. A chauffeur with a white cowboy hat drove. 3 4x4s followed it. The passenger in the last one looked at Romulus, or seemed to look at him. He wore mirror-lensed sunglasses, making it hard to tell for sure. Romulus had just committed a crime that could lead to summary recycling, so maybe he was just being paranoid. The fierce sun rose over Corpus Christi Bay. It was already 80 degrees, and the temperature would soar to 100. There was a sticky residue on the cracked sidewalk, the remnants of all the pollutants and other particulates. Some days the heat would burn off the fog, leaving more residue. That day dark clouds gathered, and an oily drizzle fell as he walked to the bus station. The moisture and pollutants didn't bother him the way it bothered the reals. He could feel it, and he could analyze its constituents. The advanced sensing array in his synth skin was not the latest and best, but was more than adequate to tell him if there was something caustic. What he struggled to understand was the emotional component. The weather delighted humans or threw them into depression. A bright sunny day generally lifted their spirits, and a dark overcast day plunged them into despair. But it wasn't always that way. Sometimes the relentless sun depressed them, and sometimes a stormy day delighted them. He had no such emotions, and that made him sad. The deteriorating buildings of old downtown sat in the fetid water in the bay. As sea levels rose worldwide, the city-states could not handle the change. Old downtown was lower than the hospital. One-story structures were completely submerged. The 2-story ones barely poked above the surface. The taller buildings jutted up from the water. They had been steadily deteriorating and had become the province of mutated animals, alligators and water snakes at the lower levels, and gulls and other birds at the higher levels. A motorboat putted between two of the taller buildings. Fishing was always good around one cowboy plaza. The catch could be polluted, but so many of the reels were hungry that they took the risk. Above, high in the shattered windows of one cowboy, two huge gulls swooped down to follow the boat.